The Paul Leslie Interviews.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of our listening audience, it is our great pleasure to welcome our special guest, Tom Snow. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
For everyone out there that's listening, my first question, who is Tom Snow?
Oh, Tom Snow is a songwriter, happily retired at this point, who worked in Hollywood from, the summer of 1969 and right up through 2005, and wrote songs for a number of people from Pointer Sisters all the way to the Tubes, everybody in between, Dolly Parton, you name it. I wrote them.
Well, take us back a little bit. What was life like growing up?
Oh, for me it was moving from one house to another. My parents had a home in Princeton, New Jersey, and one in Sarasota, Florida, where they went for the winters, and another one in Martha's Vineyard where they spent summers. So I kind of followed them around, nice places. And then when I was, 12 and a half, 13, I was in the back of a car going to look at boarding schools in New England. So I spent 3 years at a school in Connecticut called Pomfret, and then I finished up at another boarding school in Coconut Grove, Florida, a place called Ransom. And that was it. It was just sort of that kind of migratory upbringing, if you will, if there's such a term.
Did you always have a strong love for music?
Yes, pretty as far back as I can remember. There was a lot of music in the house. My parents were involved in theater, so often I'd hear musical, songs from the great songs from the great musicals, South Pacific and My Fair Lady and so forth. My father also played piano by ear and sang. He was an actor, so there was a lot of that going on. And my mom took me at a very early age, started going to symphonies, and gave me an ear for classical music. I think by the time I was 8, I think third grade, I told her I wanted to play trumpet and she said, well, you're not going to practice trumpet in the house, but there's a piano over there that you're certainly welcome to go practice, and we'll get you lessons. And that's pretty much when it started, and I went from there.
Can you remember the first song you ever wrote?
Oh, well, I can tell, yeah. The first song I ever wrote was in my freshman year at the Berklee College of Music, where I had gone with the dream of becoming a jazz pianist, and I really hadn't thought much about being a songwriter. But it was 1965 in Boston, and there was the whole sort of folk rock revolution was happening, and I don't know if revolution is the right word, but anyways, that kind of music, and I was surrounded by that on weekends. And so the first song I wrote was a song for my sister's baby girl, Daphne, who had just been born, and I wrote a tune about that. I did try to convince my mother when I was eight or so. I used to watch faithfully the Wonderful World of Disney on television, and they always started the show off with "When You Wish Upon a Star," and I actually went over to the piano and picked that one out by ear. And then I guess I was too young to know any better. I thought, wow, I think I just wrote this. So I wish I could say that was the first song I wrote, but in fact.
Well, I wanted to ask you, when you're writing a song, how does the composition start for you? What inspires it?
Well, a good title always inspires, and so you're always, and I'm sure that any professional songwriter will tell you that, you're always looking for a good title because it gives you a point of view and a good place to start from. So that's one way, and then those don't always come along. So just going in the room and closing the door and sitting down at the piano and just banging away for however long it takes until some good idea arrives is another form, and probably the more typical form of inspiration. I know there's a quote even George Gershwin said it took him every day 2 hours to write through the Drek. So I think probably that's the way I got my inspiration more than anything else, was just sitting down at the piano and going and waiting for inspiration. You had to work to find inspiration. So the inspiration is always more of an after product, I think, of just showing up every day and going to work. Every now and then, very rarely, a tune fully formed will pop out, and that's only because one is writing so much all the time, and I always had 2 or 3 songs underway, and it's very intense when you're in the business. For me, anyways, it was pretty much 24/7 all the time, just constantly obsessed with the songs that you're working on.
Just all around as a musician, both as a composer and as a pianist, who would you say your biggest influences are?
Well, there's so many. I mean, the reason I got into music to begin with was Bill Evans. And when everybody was sort of really getting into the folk music and the Beatles and Bob Dylan and all that stuff, I was completely immersed in sort of 60s jazz. And Bill Evans, of course, was a great genius and a great figure there. So his piano playing, I'd like to say it influenced me, but I could never play that well. I mean, I tried, but I just didn't have that ability. So, but it was huge, and there was on the other side of the coin, a different style of piano playing. There's a guy named Bobby Timmons who played with Cannonball Adderley, very funky, bluesy stuff. So those two things. I think my influences are very eclectic, and I think that my discography is a reflection of that, because I wrote in all kinds of styles, and essentially music was music. I didn't ever try to label whatever I was doing. So, and then, just the great songwriters, certainly of the golden age of songwriting, the American Songbook, and the Rodgers and Hart and Rodgers and Hammerstein and Lerner and Lowe and Frank Lesser, big deal for me, Frank Lesser. He wrote Guys and Dolls, and so there's a lot of that coming in as well. That of course comes from my upbringing and my parents being involved in theater, so I heard all those great songs. So I had a great appreciation for that. I didn't really listen too much to country music when I was growing up, but I later did, and learned to just love the great country writers and the lyrics, especially in particular, that come out of country music. Had a big impact on me, just in terms of, like, you just can't write any old lyric. You got to tell a really good story. So I guess it's a number of things that influenced me, not any one more than the other, however.
In addition to the songs that you've written for other people, you also had your own recording career. So I wanted you to take us back to the first record you made. What was that experience like?
It was chaotic. I was it wasn't a solo effort. It was in a band that I started with another fella when I arrived in Los Angeles in the summer of, right after I graduated from Berklee College of Music. I got on an airplane, left the East Coast, headed for the West Coast, and struck up a songwriting relationship with a fellow employee at a record store in the summer of '69, and we ultimately created a band called Country, oddly enough, Country, because of the sort of the country rock thing that was going on in the early '70s. And we got signed to Atlantic Records, and to actually a subsidiary label of Atlantic called Clean Records, as in everybody needs a clean record. And we made an album, and we had Ahmet Ertegun come out to produce a cut, and it was all very heady stuff, but it was also quite chaotic because we were all very young. And so I made that record, and then the band broke up, and then I went on to a solo career. I made my first solo album for Capitol Records a couple of years later. I think it was in '75. And that was a much more sort of considered effort, and it was just me essentially writing everything myself. It was fun. It was that was fun doing those 2 records. They didn't go anywhere, and my artist career really never took off, but it was informative, and I made some noise in Hollywood, so it helped out later with my songwriting career.
I wanted to ask you about the first song you wrote that was recorded by another artist. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Rita Coolidge?
That's close. I actually wrote a song in music school at Berklee, and it was recorded by a group called the Bagatelle, who were 3 sort of curbside. It started off as sort of this. They grew up in Roxbury, Massachusetts, and environment of Boston, and I had joined the band when they were called the Mandrells, and then I left the band after a year. This was all while I was going to Berklee, and then they got signed to ABC Records and made an album, and I wrote a couple of songs for them. And that was those were the first 2 songs I'd ever had recorded, and one of them was called Such a Fuss About Sunday, and the other one was called something original like Hey You or something. But I mean, that was while I was a student. So, and I'd had some songs recorded before Rita did You, but You was the song that really kind of opened the door for me to meeting other great writers like Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, because Rita's recording won a BMI Pop Award, and so I got invited to the annual dinner, and it sort of was my introduction into the, if you will, for the upper echelons of songwriting, you know, in Los Angeles in 1970, whatever it was, 7 or something. So it was the first in that sense.
You just mentioned a second ago Cynthia Weil, such a great lyricist.
Yes.
Tell me about meeting her. How did you meet her?
I met her at that particular BMI Pop Awards dinner, which I guess that must have been in 77 or maybe later, 78 or 79, something like that. Yeah, would have been around there. And she was aware of who I was, but it's great because we, you know, they both Barry and Cynthia are dear friends and longtime friends and lovely people. You know, she was cagey, she was smart, so they were writers over at ATV Music at the time of the Rita cut, and while they were suitably impressed with that song, she didn't write with me right away, so I got to write with another writer over at ATV. She kind of saw what I wrote there, and then finally she consented to write with me. We had a lot of success together. So, but that's where I met her, at the BMI dinner. It was kind of, you know, nothing terribly sexy about that story.
Well, you mentioned earlier in the interview that you've written songs for everyone from the Pointer Sisters to the Tubes, and that's incredibly diverse.
Yeah, it is. And it's not because I was trying to, it's just sort of the way it happened. When I would sit down and write a song, when I was in the real middle of my career, every day, you know, like any other songwriter, you know, you get up, you go into your room and go to work. I was aware of who was looking and who was recording at the time, but I wasn't doing any particular target writing. So I just kind of went where the muse would take me, and sometimes that would be, it would end up being an R&B or even a country hit like "Don't Call It Love" that Dolly Parton and a number of country artists cut. But I was never writing in any one particular vein. It was just, I guess for lack of a better term, it was everything I wrote was always had a pop sensibility to it. But I was able to, and I think I give a lot of credit to my Berkeley education, that I was able to sort of hang with, I could write for Barbra Streisand, or I could go over and hang with Little Feat and write with them. I don't know. That's just, I'm a chameleon, I guess.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that Pointer Sisters song, He's So Shy.
Right.
Tell us about that song.
That was my first really, really big hit, and it was born of 3 weeks of frustration of not having anything come out of my music room. And I was feeling like a musical dope, just going through a dry period. One evening after dinner, I went back into the studio and put on a metronome. I actually had a little Roland beatbox, Roland 880. I'd had a glass of wine or two, feeling pretty loose, so I wasn't too trying too hard, and then I just started playing arpeggios on the piano in time to this little rhythm that I'd set up on a beatbox, because that's all I could think of to do. So I thought, well, I might as well make some music here. It's sort of like the writer staring at the blank page and writing only all work and no play makes Johnny, you know. But as soon as, I don't know what happened, I got this little groove going and these G minor arpeggios going, and then pretty soon a little melody just decided to come and visit, and I started singing, as Quincy Jones calls them, quaalude lyrics, blah, 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 just to have something carry the tune that was coming out of my head. And then when I hit the chorus, when I found a chorus vibe, I actually was thinking about Leo Sayre's wife, Jan, and I had been working with Leo and was feeling very grateful to him for giving me, you know, my shot. So I thought, well, this sounds like it might be a great idea for Leo, and I thought of her, and She's So Shy, because she was terribly, terribly shy, popped into my head. So it started life as She's So Shy, ended up as He's So Shy, with Cynthia finishing the lyric and Richard Perry cutting it on the Pointer Sisters. I'm sad to say Leo passed on the song when he heard it. But that just shows you, all you can do is write them.
Tell us, what was the song that you wrote that the Tubes recorded?
Oh, what was it called? Fee Waybill came over to the house to write because I was having success and I was on the charts, and I forget who. I might have even been David Foster who sent him over. And we sat down, and there's like this crazy super high energy San Francisco. No, he wasn't crazy. He was very nice, but super high energy San Francisco rock art, very super creative guy. And I knew something had to have a sort of a rock feel. So I just put on as best I could my rock hat, and we wrote a tune called Piece by Piece, I think it's called, and made a decent enough demo, and it got on their record, the record that David was producing with him.
One of the songs that you co-wrote with Cynthia Weil is Somewhere Down the Road that Barry Manilow recorded.
Yeah.
Just a fantastic song, beautiful song.
Oh.
How did that song come about?
That song came melody first, and that was one of those fully formed melodies that just, I don't know, it was like a real gift, that one. I was, the muses were being real kind to me. So I just remember the melody one afternoon just all of a sudden coming out of me. It was actually, I sort of had to just let it happen and hold on for the ride. It was a pretty intense experience. And I think, again, I was just sort of singing nonsense syllables for lyrics, but I think on the chorus I sort of mumbled something like somewhere down the line, and Cynthia always liked to get melodies from me with whatever sort of subliminal, subconscious words left in. Some I've written with other people that just said, no, I just want to hear la 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 la. Once you get the melody, I don't want to hear anything that might say. Cynthia liked the sort of subconscious suggestion. So I had the melody and I sent it over to her, and she called me up and she said, "Oh wow, I hope you don't mind if I take a little time with this because I'm a little intimidated by the beauty of the melody." I said, "You take all the time you need." So, but I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks. Normally, Cynthia gets something done in within a week, but 2 or 3 weeks later, she sent me over the lyric, and her first thing she said to me said, "Now, don't get nervous. I know the title looks like prosaic, but just sing it a couple times and see how you feel." And obviously, I loved it right away. But that was a classic case of music first, and then a great lyricist coming up with a great lyric.
What did you think of Barry Manilow's recording?
I like it. Barry does it in concert now, and he's such a sweet man. He always mentions Cynthia and me when he performs it, but he does it just solo at a piano, which is great because Barry's a very sensitive and very talented musician himself in his own right, from his years of orchestrating and arranging for Bette Midler and so forth. So he understood the fragile beauty of the song and likes to perform it that way. Now, I know that when he was recording at Arista, Clive Davis gave him a sound and that sort of big, I hate to use the word, and I don't mean it in any disrespectful way, but bombastic.
Yeah. And
so it got a little over the top there when we first heard it. It was a bit of a shock. We were thrilled that he recorded it. See, the best thing I can say is that I was thrilled that he recorded it, and I really like it I love it when he performs it live. Can I give you that kind of a
definitely
politician answer?
This is a very tough question for a lot of composers. Could you pick a favorite song that you've written?
That I've written?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just keep going back to He's So Shy. There's so many. Obviously, so many of my colleagues and people you've interviewed, we've all written many, many songs, and each time they're coming out, they're a part of us or however you want to say that, and they're sort of like children. And I have a few songs that I don't think ever got recorded that are, compositionally, that impressed me the most. I'll put it that way. But overall, I think I just love He's So Shy. There's something about the tune and about the way it came about and how it really kicked off my sort of hit writing career and the whole way it brought Cynthia and I did that together. So I have a special affection for that one.
I also wanted to ask about the Footloose movie.
Mm-hmm. The new one or the old one?
The old one.
Okay, back in 82.
84, wasn't it?
Yeah, 84. I beg your pardon. 84.
How did that come to be?
The man behind all of that is Dean Pitchford. He wrote the screenplay, and he wrote all the lyrics to the song. So I had been working with Dean at that point for a couple of years, and I think by that time we'd already written "Don't Call It Love," and we'd written "You Should Hear How She Talks About You" for Melissa Manchester, and we were very good friends and strong collaborators. And he brought me in on the project. The film studio, when you're working in film, the film studio calls all the shots. So, you definitely you're a worker bee. So you have very little control over what happens. Dean asked me to actually, before they started shooting, read the script, and there was a cue for a song that he'd put in the script. He and I wrote that song before filming, and that was the song called "Somebody's Eyes." I came in pre-production, and then "Let's Hear It for the Boy" came about in post-production. That was really a result of my friendship and successful collaboration with Dean at the time.
Well, that same year, I believe it was, in 1984, was when Peebo Bryson came out with "If Ever You're in My Arms."
Yes, right. "If Ever You're in My Arms Again." Yeah.
Yeah, and that song has just endured. I mean, you still hear it all the time.
It's amazing. Well, I mean, now there's a fabulous vocal. Boy, when I heard that, I just went, wow.
I heard Peebo Bryson perform that in concert. It's a wonderful song. So tell us about how that was inspired.
I co-wrote the music with Michael Masser. We came up with this melody, and Michael was not just a songwriter. He was also songwriter, producer, and was having all kinds of hits. Anyways, we came up with this ballad together, and then we cobbled out a lyric, which I can't even remember what the title was, but we sang. We knew the music was great. We thought the lyric was okay, but I think he called me a couple days after we had finished this tune, and he said, it's really not a great lyric. And I said, yeah, you're right. And he said, we've got a potential hit song here with this music. Let's pull in a great lyricist. And I said, I'm down with that. So guess who came on board? Cynthia. It's interesting because Cynthia was one of the few lyricists I worked with who preferred writing the music, which, in every book on songwriting I've ever read, that's general. I mean, especially from the golden era, it was always music first. It was always, when Johnny Mercer coming in second and writing a lyric to Jimmy Van Heusen melody or something. So, which I liked because it gives the composer freedom. You're not constrained by a lyric in front of you, which often is da-da-da-da, 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 da-da. You know what I'm saying? Because with all respect to lyricists, they're not composers necessarily. So I always felt fortunate and admired Cynthia's inclination to write that way, music first, lyric second. So that was the case with music first, then lyric, and then lyric rewritten, thankfully.
On the subject of lyricists, and you don't have to answer this question, has there been a favorite lyricist that you've worked with?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back and say Cynthia. I just adore everything we wrote. I just love her. What can I say? They're all great, but I guess I do have a special place in my heart for Cynthia.
Another great lyricist that you worked with was the great Jack Feldman. Tell us about working with him.
Oh, well, Jack and I, we worked in the world of Disney together, and I believe it was Disney who put us together. In fact, I'm sure it was. The television animation department at Disney brought us together on the TV pilot for A Little Mermaid. The movie had already been out and was a huge success. So Disney wanted to do a TV series. So we worked over at TV Animation. We weren't working over at the Big Lot. And so Jack and I were brought in to write the theme for the pilot show. And we just hit it off and had a great time and worked on a Goofy movie together, and then on the follow-up, Lion King 2. And Jack is a wonderful, wonderful theatrical lyricist, and just is, I got to put him up there with Cynthia, too, thinking about my favorite people and favorite lyricists. He's so good and just so much fun, and it was just an absolute delight, no matter notwithstanding the kind of dire pressure that one is under when you write and work for Disney. I mean, you're set back, and if you want to get 3 songs in a movie, it's not unusual to write 10 of them or have that many rewrites. But it was always fun with Jack, always great.
I also wanted to ask you about the song. It's another one of those songs that has just endured on the radio. Don't Know Much. Yeah.
Well, there we go again. That's another case of 2 composers sitting down and coming up with a melody, and that would be Cynthia's husband, Barry Mann, came over to my house one day, and I wasn't I didn't do it a lot, and I'm sure he didn't either. It's a little, it can be perilous. It wasn't with Barry, of course, because he's a very generous guy, but you get in a room with another composer, and it's sort of like, who makes the first move? It could be a good thing, or it could be a duel. and I'd had a few of those that didn't pan out. But with Barry, we just kind of kicked some ideas around, and I played a little riff on the piano, da da da, sort of a little like Copeland-esque Presbyterian church-sounding thing, da 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 da. And he went, oh, do that again, and then he got on fire, and then he said, wait a minute, and then he sat down and he just popped up with this verse melody, and we put that one together. Actually, I think maybe in a day. Cynthia then wrote that sublime lyric, and I've often said to Cynthia that, for my money, the strongest part of that song is the lyric. I mean, the melody is nice, but it's not the strongest melody I ever wrote. I think Barry would agree that it's not the strongest he ever wrote, but it was very serviceable. It has, of course, a very warm feeling musically, but the lyric is so great. And that went on to be nominated for Song of the Year, actually, for a Grammy.
Great song.
Yeah, thanks.
When somebody listens to a song that you've written, what do you hope that the people get out of the experience of listening?
I hope it'll move them. One way or another. It will touch them. I think that's what I'm after. I'm not after sending any big message. As I think it was Samuel Goldwyn said, if you want to send a message, use Western Union. Yeah, I mean, if it touches them, moves them, in whatever way, emotionally, or if I see them grooving to it, or, I mean, that's when I know I've done my job and communicated a little bit. And people adore music. It's always so nice when people tell me how much my stuff has meant to them, because not everybody has the great fortune to be able to sit down and write music. So, and it's a very mysterious process, coming up with something out of thin air like music. And when you get feedback from people like I'm getting now with my website, which is that how you found me, by the way?
Yes, TomSnowMusic.com.
Right. Yeah. So finally, my wife gave this website to me as a present. She designed it for last Christmas, and put it up there. And I'm getting this wonderful gratification from the occasional email that comes in, or people all around the world, people in Sweden and France, Spain, Japan, Montana. It's just great. I mean, that I think is the thing that gives me the most gratification, that they're touched or moved in some way.
Well, speaking of the internet and TomSnowMusic.com, I was doing some reading on there, and then I posted on my Facebook that I was going to be doing an interview with you, and I had one of my listeners who wrote in, and she said that Dreaming of You is one of her favorite songs.
Oh, yeah.
Of all time. And so she wanted to know about that song.
I wrote that with another great and dear friend, Franny Goldie. We were successful together as sort of both musical type, composers and lyricists. We just get into a room, I guess much like it's done down in Nashville when 2 people get together and they sort of hammer out some music and hammer out a lyric. And that particular song, we were actually writing for a little group called the Jets, which had a couple of hits, and they were a smooth, middle-of-the-road R&B group. I think we even had one of the singers come up to the house to do the demo for us from the group and so forth, but we didn't get anywhere with them, so the song just kind of sat on the shelf for a bit. But Franny is nothing if not one of the world's best song pluggers. She's amazing. She's everywhere, And I got a call from her saying that there was this gal, Selena, who was going to record it, and this was very close to the time when Selena was tragically killed. So and I was excited about it. I didn't know exactly anything too much about Selena at the time. And then, the song got cut. Selena sang her entire lead, and then she was murdered. Franny went in and finished up some of the background vocals on the fade in a sort of a Selena-esque kind of voice, and that's how that one came about. It was a terrible thing. It was shocking. The song has had a really good life, and I know that there are a lot of people that love it. So.
Is there anything on the horizons with Tom Snow?
No, I think I'm done. I think I ran out of notes. There's plenty of people writing songs, and I subscribe to a quote from a French composer named Hector Berlioz, he was a very famous orchestrator composer in the 19th century, who said, "Never compose anything unless it's a nuisance not to." So I've been very fortunate in my career, and I don't have to write. And so far, there's nothing that's bugging me and being a nuisance that's making me want to write. I always have an idea, but I think in terms of writing as a hobby is not something I want to do, and I think I'm pretty much done with dealing with the music business per se. So we'll see. I don't know. I mean, I never say no. That something might make me want to sit down. Probably if I were to get back to writing, it would be something more of an instrumental, maybe even in a small orchestral sense or something, and kind of going all the way back to my Berklee College roots and pulling up the old compositional stuff from those days. And so, but I don't know. I have nothing big on the horizon except occasionally something comes through, like Let's Hear It for the Boy is going to be in the remake of Footloose, which is nice to know. So hopefully that'll have another life. Outside of that, the only thing on my horizon is golf with my buddies on Wednesdays and Saturday.
Not bad.
Not bad. No kidding. I'm not complaining.
What is the best thing about being Tom Snow?
Oh, the best thing I think is my life. What can I say? I've been incredibly lucky. Just celebrated my 39th wedding anniversary with Mary Bell, and I have great friends and live in a great place. So, boy, I'd say it's the whole ball of wax.
Well, I have two final questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
This first one is kind of lighthearted. What is your all-time favorite meal?
All-time favorite meal?
Yes, sir.
Oh, no, boy. Well, my sister lives in Italy and has most of her life, and she has kids, and they all live in Florence. So I would say a great Florentine steak. It's the best steak I've ever had in my life. With, I don't want to sound too gourmetish, but pasta carbonara, which is pasta made with eggs and the Italian bacon, the name of which now escapes me. So yeah, sort of like that with a great wine, a really, really good wine. That would be it. Second to that would probably be a really good In-N-Out double cheeseburger, animal style.
All right. Well, that's much like your songwriting in that it's diverse.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, for the last question, it's open-ended. For all the people who are listening in, wherever they are in the world, what would you like to say to all the listeners?
What would I say to all the listeners? Keep listening and thank you. I would say thank you for listening. I think is really, if I could, thank you so much for the feedback that I get from the listeners and just for keeping music alive. It's a real important thing. So God bless all the listeners, I think is what I'd say.
Well, Mr. Snow, thank you so much for giving so generously of your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you and doing this interview.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I enjoyed the questions and had a great time doing it too.
All right. Well, have a great day.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. You too.